Hi, I'm Jacob, and you're listening to Cities in Motion, the podcast for anyone who wants cities built for people. Every week, we dig into the systems, design, and culture that shape urban life and explore how smarter transportation, better planning, and thoughtful policy can make our communities more livable. Today, we're taking a closer look at why modern cars and SUVs have become so oversized. Why do they take up so much space, create bigger blind spots, and come with so much added mass compared to older models? The answer begins with a change in federal policy from the 1970s, a change that continues to influence how vehicles are built. By the end of this episode, you'll understand how that decision set off a chain of effects still visible in every parking lot today. Let's start at the beginning. Well, not that early. Early cars were tiny compared to modern cars. The Model T, introduced in 1908, was light, narrow, and just 13 feet long. It wasn't meant to be luxurious, it was a motorized buggy. After World War II, things changed. As Americans grew wealthier, suburban homes grew bigger, and so did the cars in their driveways. By the 1960s and 70s, cars like the Chevrolet Impala, Chrysler New Yorker, stretched nearly 13 feet long, with V8 engines that guzzled gasoline like it was infinite. Big was status, big was luxurious, and big was American. But then came a crisis that flipped everything upside down.
It hadn't just happened overnight. The stage for this energy drama had been set long ago. Back in the days when a part of the American dream was to own a big car. In those days, we spoke of our freedom to move around. Specifically, we meant our freedom to drive around, to drive in as big a car as we could afford. And why not? Gas was cheap and plentiful. And as we drove around in our big cars, who could have known that we were literally running out of gas?
In 1973, the OPEC oil embargo caused gasoline prices to spike almost overnight. Americans lined up for hours to fill their tanks. The U.S. realized very suddenly how vulnerable it was to oil supply shocks. In response, Congress passed the first ever National Fuel Efficiency Rules, CAFE, or Corporate Average Fuel Economy. The goal was simple: make cars more fuel efficient so the U.S. wouldn't be crippled by another oil crisis. Passenger cars were required to meet a fleet average of 27.5 miles per gallon by 1985. Automakers shrank engines, lightened vehicles, and redesigned car bodies to slip through the air more efficiently. But one category of vehicle slipped through the cracks: light trucks. Light trucks were assumed to be farm vehicles, worksite equipment, delivery trucks, utility vehicles. Policymakers in 1975 did not imagine millions of families commuting in them, much less parking them in school pickup lines. In that regulatory blind spot, the light truck loophole would eventually reshape the entire U.S. vehicle market. Automakers realized something almost immediately. If you design a vehicle that looks and feels like a car, but which technically qualifies as a truck, you can avoid the stricter fuel economy standards applied to sedans. Enter the first wave of SUVs: the Chevy Blazer, the Ford Bronco, the Jeep Cherokee. Originally built on truck frames, these vehicles slowly became more comfortable, more stylish, and more luxurious. Leather seats, carpeting, good sound systems, multiple rows of seating. By the 90s, the SUV was no longer a work truck, it was a lifestyle. Federal rules made smaller cars harder to sell for profit. In the mid-2000s, regulators updated CAFE again and introduced something called the footprint rule. A vehicle's footprint is the rectangle formed by its wheelbase. The larger the footprint, the lower the required fuel economy target for that vehicle. It was meant to prevent automakers from building tiny, unsafe cars just to hit high miles per gallon numbers. But it had a side effect, an incentive to make vehicles bigger. A 2017 University of Michigan study estimated the footprint rule alone could increase vehicle size by 2 to 35%, reducing real-world fuel savings, the equivalent of 3 to 10 coal plants worth of emissions. And because larger vehicles have lower miles per gallon requirements, it became economically attractive for automakers to build bigger vehicles, which also happen to deliver bigger profit margins. This is why 2025 trucks now have hood lines tall enough to hide small children in front of them. And that brings us to the latest news. Just this week, the Trump administration announced a major rollback to U.S. fuel economy rules, reversing years of attempts to push automakers towards more efficient fleets.
We're officially terminating Joe Biden's ridiculously burdensome, horrible actually, CAFE standards that imposed expensive restrictions and all sorts of problems, gave all sorts of problems to automakers. And we're not only talking about here, we're talking about outside of our country.
Here's what the change does. 1. It lowers future fuel economy targets. Standards that were aiming for roughly 50 miles per gallon equivalent by 2031 are now being revised downward to about 34.5 miles per gallon. 2. It eliminates penalties for missing fuel economy targets. For years, if automakers didn't meet CAFE goals, they paid fines. Those fines are now gone. 3. It reduces pressure to electrify. With weaker standards and no penalties, automakers can sell more large gas-powered vehicles without financial consequences. Industry groups praise the move. Environmental advocates say it undercuts decades of climate progress. States are preparing lawsuits, and automakers are openly signaling they double down on high-profit trucks and SUVs. In other words, the same regulatory dynamics that pushed vehicles bigger for 50 years are being reinforced right now. When you are surrounded by giant vehicles, it isn't just an aesthetic annoyance. There are real safety impacts. Tall hood lines dramatically increase pedestrian fatality risk. Large blind zones can hide entire adults, not just kids. Heavier EV trucks are even more dangerous in crashes. Visibility at intersections declines as vehicles get boxier and taller. A pedestrian struck by a small sedan is likely to be hit in the legs. A pedestrian struck by a modern full-size truck is hit in the torso or head. And as SUVs have grown, U.S. pedestrian fatalities have climbed to a 40-year high. Despite all this, Americans consistently choose bigger vehicles. Why? There are a few reasons. Space and comfort, a feeling of safety, even if statistically untrue. Marketing, billions spent convincing buyers that bigger is safer. Social status, family needs, and importantly, policy. And from the automaker perspective, it's simple. SUVs and trucks make $8,000 to $15,000 in profit per sale. Small cars make a few $100s at most. So vehicles get bigger, ads get bolder, parking spots stay the same size, and pedestrians suffer the consequences. Not everything is bleak. A small new generation of compact EVs and micro trucks is emerging. Innovators are experimenting with smaller electric pickups, minimalist utility vehicles, and clever urban EVs designed for cities, not freeways. Cities like New York are studying differential parking fees based on vehicle size. European cities are considering extra taxes on large SUVs. Insurance companies are analyzing ways to price risk for giant vehicles. Large vehicles exist for real reasons, and many families truly need them, but we often forget how much of our car preference landscape was shaped by a 1970s loophole, decades of incentives to build larger vehicles, marketing that made big synonymous with safe, and policy decisions, including the December 2025 rollback, that reinforce those trends today. If we want safer streets and a more sustainable future, it starts with understanding the system that got us here, and that system was never just about consumer choice. I'd love to hear what you think. What do today's oversized vehicles mean for your daily life? Whether you drive one, avoid them, or walk and bike around them, how do modern SUVs change the way you experience the city? I'm Jacob. This has been Cities in Motion. Thanks for listening. And don't forget to like this podcast, share it with your friends, and subscribe to catch new episodes every Friday.